Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
One of the things I think everybody agrees that the Cleveland Browns need to add to their roster this offseason is a veteran wide receiver. If we're looking at this wide receiver room, Jerry Jeudy is put in a position that Jerry Jeudy really shouldn't be put in, which is being the veteran in the locker room. I think that was the catalyst to him having such a bad year following a career high performance in 2020. I believe, right? So knowing that you don't want to put Jerry Jeudy in that position again, knowing that you're not in a position to just jettison Jerry Jeudy either, what veteran wide receivers that are out there could make sense for the Cleveland Browns? One of the things I think is important to keep in mind in this conversation is something that came up when I was talking to Tyvis Powell, a former NFL player, and he brought this up to me, and he said, hey, if you're going to get a veteran wide receiver, it would be a lot more helpful if that guy had a name that everybody respected, which is to say, you're not going to get the benefit of a veteran wide receiver if that wide receiver doesn't have the name for people to want to listen to that guy. You can get the right information from a lot of people, but only a few people are people going to actually listen to when they have the right information, right? It's one of the hurdles. And when you're looking for a veteran wide receiver to bring in, not only does that guy need to have experience at the position, but they need to be able to have some kind of pull to where when they talk, these young guys listen, because if you don't have that, then you're not really benefiting from having an experienced player in your locker room. You're just having an old wide receiver in your locker room. So that's another factor that we're going to kind of go through and be thorough about when it comes to considering what veteran wide receiver should the Browns try to go after. We'll talk about that, but first I got to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Talk to you guys real quick about Sleeper, the app for daily fantasy, regular fantasy, and now if you look at the pick section on the Sleeper app and go to the team section, you have predictions that you can now use on the Sleeper app. You can choose winners of games. So let's say you're a Cavs fan, the Cavs play the Wizards or something like that, and you think the Cavs are going to beat the Wizards, you can pick the Cavs to beat the Wizards in that kind of scenario. For me personally, I went with the Cavs getting the championship this year, and of course, you know, I had to throw in the same for the Cleveland Browns winning the next Super Bowl. So if you want to join in the fun on that, make sure you join the Sleeper app. If you also want to use the Sleeper app for all the other things I mentioned, make sure you use the promo code Worst Take. Get a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Make sure you join the Sleeper app. Okay, so when we talk about veteran wide receivers, I think there's like 3 tiers of guys that the Browns really need to consider. And again, we're not necessarily looking for somebody who has a lot of like years in the game exclusively. It's somebody who has a name that carries value to some of these younger players, right? This is where those guys are extremely useful. We don't really talk about this enough because so much of sports talk and so much of player acquisition and free agency just becomes a numbers game. So we're like, oh, this guy used to be great, but he's 33. He doesn't have value anymore. And we kind of lose the people element of the game when we try to boil everything down to a callous survey of exclusively just looking at numbers, right? There is value that a older big name player can bring to your franchise that isn't necessarily what they could do on the field still. I made this argument last year when it came to Nick Chubb. Was Nick Chubb at the point of his career where he was going to go out and be your feature back and get you 1,000 yards? No. But was Nick Chubb still a playable NFL A player, yes. And does Nick Chubb add value because of who he is specifically to the Cleveland Browns organization? I think so. If you're looking for somebody to create buy-in on the offensive side of the ball, especially in the running back room, Nick Chubb is going to be able to generate that buy-in from younger players because they're going to look at Nick Chubb and go, well, I want to be like him. I want to have a career like Nick Chubb. So I'm going to listen to Nick Chubb and follow his example. This is the kind of stuff that gets lost when you're just callously cutting players because they're 28 or 29 years old and you don't care about what their name means to the rest of the locker room. Football is a science in one way, it's an art in another way, it's politics in another way, right? There's a lot of things that you have to juggle if you want to manage a team or build a team or coach a team that people try to ignore because they're not trying to manage all three of these things, but it's impossible to ignore. So, yeah, some of these names might be past their prime, but we're not going after these names to be the number one receiver for the Cleveland Browns. We're going after some of these names because they have the value in the name to be able to provide positive mentorship to what is going to be an extremely young offense. And I think that is important. I think that's something the Browns should really think about during this offseason, during this free agency. If you're going to have a bunch of young guys in here at every position group on the offensive side of the ball, you should have a vested veteran, if you can, in a position of leadership in that locker room to be able to guide these guys the right way, right? So if you want to develop some young running backs, you might want to consider bringing in a veteran to be your third running back. Is he going to be the best third running back possible? No, but is he going to be fine as your running back 3 and provide a lot of value when it comes to development? Possibly. Same thing goes for wide receiver, offensive line. It's why I think that Kevin Zeitler is somebody the Browns should go after. Not going to be a solution for the next 3 years, but somebody who is a name that offensive linemen respect, right? If you're an offensive line guy, you know about Kevin Zeitler, you respect Kevin Zeitler, and you're going to do the things that Kevin Zeitler does well, or you're going to try to emulate what Kevin Zeitler does because he's a good example to follow as a pro because he has a track record that you want to replicate. So let's talk about this conversation when it comes to wide receiver. I think there are 3 tiers of names you can go after that will carry enough value to where you can get guys to listen to them. We're not really too focused on what their production's going to be. They're probably going to be wide receiver 3 or 4 after the draft, after the Browns do all of this. I'm not looking for 1,000 yards out of most these names. I'll tell you the guys I have more of an expectation for production-wise. Those are the guys in tier 1. But for most of these names, the production is a nice benefit, but really I'm hoping that they can provide a lot of value in mentorship on top of being able to fulfill a basic role at the wide receiver position. We'll start with my guys in tier 3. Tyler Lockett, Brandon Cooks. Those are guys, I think those are the last 2 guys who are going to be free agents this year that I can think of that carry enough name value to where people will listen. Tyler Lockett's been a good receiver in the league for a long time. Brandon Cooks, despite bouncing around the league a lot, has been able to have some really good seasons, and he's a wide receiver. Him and Tyler Lockett, both these guys are wide receivers. Other wide receivers respect, right? You at home, right, he might not be somebody who jumps off the screen in the mainstream, but if you've dedicated your life to the craft of playing wide receiver, you're going to have respect for what Brandon Cooks has to say in a meeting room. You're going to have respect for what Tyler Lockett has to say in a meeting room. These are names that get pulled up for teach tape, and you see their clips, and coaches show you their clips. It's kind of like an Amari Cooper thing, where you don't think of Amari Cooper as a guy like that, but then you talk to wide receivers about the wide receivers that they look up to, they're all talking about Amari Cooper. They respect dudes like that, right? Route guys who kind of made a living bouncing around teams, but were able to get their production. Tyler Lockett, Brandon Cooks. Are they going to be the most productive wide receivers for you? No, they're probably going to get you 200, 300 yards. But they will add value because when they speak, people will listen, especially in training camp, right? If you're trying to mentor a wide receiver and your coach can't get through, Tyler Lockett, Brandon Cooks might be able to get through to them. That is at the point of the career that they are at, and that is what the Browns need at wide receiver. They need the room to grow up. They need the room to be mature. Even if they draft some rookies, they're going to need that room to grow up quickly because they're going to be used quickly. They need adults in the room on the offensive side of the ball. They need some veterans who are going to be able to provide an example. Those are the last two tiers of guys. Like if you want to get this out the way by spending the least amount of money possible, Brandon Cooks, Tyler Lockett. Boom. Now, if you're willing to spend a little bit more money and you want somebody who has a little bit more clout, you're not going to have to argue with anybody about the clout that these two carry, but still aren't in a position where they're going to get you 700 or 800 yards. They're going to get you about 500 yards. We got Keenan Allen, who is coming off a 700-yard season, but I don't think that's likely this year, and DeAndre Hopkins. Now, DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is an interesting name because, one, there is the connection. I don't know if it matters anymore with Deshaun Watson. I don't know how much of a rush DeAndre Hopkins is to associate with Deshaun at this point of his career, but there is a connection there. But also, I think more relevant is Todd Monken's connection with DeAndre Hopkins. Coached him last year, knows the offense that Todd is going to try to implement. Some experience there and some experience in the AFC North. The real question is, like, how dedicated is DeAndre Hopkins to getting to a championship contender? And how dedicated is a championship contender to getting to DeAndre Hopkins? I think that part of the question matters much more than what DeAndre Hopkins wants to do, if I'm being honest with you, right? The production just hasn't been there for DeAndre to be able to get his way onto a team that is crowded at wide receiver but trying to win a championship. Maybe the Bills might be interested, but I think if you're the Bills, you're probably interested in spending money elsewhere. He's probably looking at dropping down a peg from being in that I'm a vet trying to win a ring tier to I'm a vet trying to mentor the next generation tier. And I think Cleveland might be a place for him. We'll see how that works out, if that's there. But DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is a strong candidate. Also, still at the point of his career where he could be productive for you. We're talking about legitimate production, 500 to 700 yards out of D-Hop. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. Keenan Allen, a similar case, right? You know, a big-bodied wide receiver gives you a different phenotype there that you don't really have in the wide receiver room. And then a veteran with a name that people will respect. If Keenan Allen is speaking on what you need to do as a wide receiver, you're going to listen. If DeAndre Hopkins is speaking on what you need to do as a wide receiver, you're going to listen. They're going to carry some name value there that would be better than Tyler and Brandon Cooks. Also, the productions there will move up to tier 1 guys. Now, Tyreek Hill is probably going to be the title of this video. Probably has zero chance of becoming a Cleveland Brown, but, Tyreek Hill is who everybody wants to talk about. I think it is actually kind of hilarious that Tyreek Hill is available now because the offense that Tyreek Hill would have fit in for Cleveland is the offense that we just got rid of with Kevin Stefanski. It's why we've been going after these Tyreek Hill clones over the last few years. And honestly, like what Tyreek Hill is capable of doing, and I don't want to just make him a speed guy, and I do think that he could have some success in a more vertical offense like Cleveland because he came from Kansas City, who has a vertical offense. So maybe there's something he could do here. But is it going to be worth the money for Cleveland? Like, I think with Tyreek Hill, we're probably still talking about $25 million a year. I don't know. I don't know if that fits the timeline for Cleveland. He's not the kind of wide receiver that can become a safety blanket for a young quarterback that needs to develop. Sometimes he can kind of become a hazard for young quarterbacks because they just get so used to lofting it up to Tyreek Hill. I don't think this makes sense for Tyreek Hill. I don't think this makes sense for Cleveland. I think this is a mutual not making of sense. I think Tyreek probably ends up in Buffalo or some shit like that. I know a lot of people are saying he's going to go back to Kansas City, but I don't know if Tyreek Hill is going to sign up for playing in Kansas City when Patrick Mahomes is not going to be there for at least half a season is what we're hearing. And if Pat's not there at the beginning of the season, why would Tyreek want to be there? Yeah, I think Tyreek probably ends up somewhere in like Buffalo or something like that. Maybe Baltimore. Maybe him and Lamar get together. That'd be fun. That'd be fun for some people. The South Florida connection is there, right? I think they're both Florida boys. So maybe Tyreek and Lamar. I think we're underestimating the possibility of that happening. The only thing is that it's the Ravens, and that's a wide receiver of value, and the Ravens never spend money on wide receivers, but we'll see. Tyreek Hill's not really a name that I find to be likely, but he would certainly be tier one. I mean, you talk about a guy whose name's going to carry weight in a wide receiver room in the building. Tyreek's name's going to hold weight there. People are going to listen. I just don't think it makes sense for Cleveland or Tyreek Hill, and I don't think the price is going to make sense for both sides. You know, if Tyreek Hill were to come to Cleveland would have to basically give him $40 million. The Browns aren't going to do that. And the Browns would really only want Tyreek Hill if he's willing to sign for like 20, and he's not going to do 20 in Cleveland. So that ends up being the hurdle, right? The money that the Browns would have to offer him to play wide receiver here would just be too big for him for the Browns to accept, or for him, you know, he's not going to come here on a discount. So that leaves you two other options. I think these two options are more realistic than people give it credit for, especially the last one I'm going to say. Deebo Samuel is the first option here. Again, a guy who's still productive. Thought he was reasonably productive for the Commanders despite them having an awful year where their quarterback gets hurt and everything goes wrong for him. Offensive line went to shit. Thought Deebo was relatively productive given all of that circumstance. I think he makes sense in the Cleveland Browns offense when you consider that Zay Flowers can do a lot of the stuff that Deebo does, or Deebo can do a lot of the stuff that Zay Flowers does. And then, again, name that guys in the locker room are going to respect, and somebody who can block on the perimeter too, which is going to matter in this offense. So I think Deebo Samuel's worth kicking the tires on. I think a lot of the off the field stuff with Deebo is very overblown. It reeks of management not liking that he's not going to be like a cheap player, or a player that's willing to be super team friendly with their deals. But I don't think he's actually a locker room issue. You don't hear players talk about Deebo or even coaches. It's always like management. I don't really care what management thinks about a player's locker room ability. Usually they don't fucking know what they're talking about, or they're speaking on stuff because like they want to drive down a player's value in the market, which I think a lot of the Deebo noise smells like that to me, at least. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't really buy it. The next guy, I don't think I have to make the argument about why this would make sense. I think I have to make the argument about why it would happen, is Mike Evans. This would be the dream. Like if you told me I could pick one wide receiver and he could come to Cleveland, I would pick Mike Evans. This would probably be the hardest guy to get because Mike Evans is still at that point of his career where he could absolutely go to a championship contender. Maybe the Browns would have to outbid somebody to get him. I do think Todd being here helps because he does have a relationship with Mike Evans and Mike has had success under him. But yeah, if you want to know who the perfect fit for this would be, it would absolutely 1,000% be Mike Evans. Will the Browns be able to get Mike Evans? Well, you know, that's a tougher question, right? Like I like to think that there's more of a possibility there. Maybe the Bills aren't interested. Maybe some contenders aren't interested. And then he starts thinking about his other goals he wants to achieve in his career. And maybe Cleveland might be it for him, you know. It could fall into that place, which happens often with free agents of Mike Evans' age. I would gladly offer him a contract and gladly bring him on to the Cleveland Browns because I think he's exactly what this organization could use. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.